is haunted. Oh, we're live. We're live. The internet is haunted, and we're live. We're live. Now there was a major malfunction. I don't know if it was the crap I'm using, my internet connection, or YouTube itself. YouTube itself. But here I'm back. I'm calling this part 2, assuming the stupid little tiny touchscreen keyboard worked. I think I titled this part 2. I'll fix the title later. Now, normally when it's a glitch with my internet connection or this damn thing here, well, this thing crashed. I'm pretty sure it crashed. Normally when that happens, a lot of the glitches I can actually return to the same live stream, and the final product, the final digital file that it's recorded as online, it's just kind of like it goes from the last frame that it was recording in the previous session right to the next one. Excuse me. My sinuses are doing that thing where they struggle to get air through, and I'm almost out of nasal spray. Have to go get more. But or maybe the internet is haunted. I don't know. The internet is haunted. The internet didn't want me to get online. We're going to have to deal with an internet haunting. Yes, there are creepy people on the internet. The internet is haunted. We're going to have to deal with that. I don't know. Anyway, I'll just get to the point that I wasn't getting to in the first place. Yeah, a lot of people talking about the Captain Marvel movie, and the individual who plays Captain Marvel has been saying shitty stuff on the internet, which, you know, it's lame. It's just lame. But you know, whatever. It's kind of like, would I let that ruin the movie for me? Well, no. Actually, in fact, I'm not that into the Marvel movies. I like them. I like them quite a bit. Mostly, I watch the Marvel movies mostly for, well, Iron Man. And that's an ongoing thing. I like Iron Man. And when it came to the old comics, I knew of Iron Man's existence, but he barely registered to me. I remember reading about people talking about Iron Man in Wizard magazine, and it just not impacted me whatsoever. I mean, I liked comic books. I liked Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern. I also really liked Spider-Man and the X-Men, you know. But the Avengers didn't really stand out as interesting to me. And when it came to those first Marvel movies, I liked Iron Man. I liked the Hulk movie. Then there was like Captain America and the Thor movie. And I think Captain America came out before Thor, but I don't know. To me, those two movies, Thor was okay. Wasn't really that incredibly interesting to me. And Captain America was okay. Again, not that interesting to me. I thought Captain America had a more interesting story, even though I don't normally care for that patriotic nonsense. But Captain America, I kind of like that the character was kind of virtuous, innocent, and self-sacrificing. But at the same time, he wasn't interesting beyond that. Tony Stark, on the other hand, while he was a rich fuck that had everything given to him, he kind of had his whole world questioned, and despite that, you know, he became a really likable character. Captain America didn't really interest me at all. Nor did Thor, but Thor as a character I actually found more interesting, and I shouldn't have, because it was less about him for me to find interesting, other than I like the idea of them taking Norse mythology and turning it into a sci-fi world, but at the same time, it's, you know, it just didn't interest me all that much. But I knew they were leading to an Avengers movie, which was going to include Iron Man, and I liked the Iron Man character. Yeah, that was about it. I mean, and Captain, yeah, I don't know. When they all get together in that same movie, it's like, again, I like the Hulk because he's the Hulk, but there's not. in some ways the Hulk is just there, like the Bruce Banner character is what makes the Hulk interesting. But then as personality comes out in the Hulk, it starts to become interesting too because he's out of control rage. But then when he's like the idea of a character that's kind of like a manifestation of out of control rage, as awareness and self control starts to manifest itself in that situation, I find that kind of interesting. Like the Hulk, and he was not like an evil character either. He was technically a benevolent being. Just he was just the Hulk, you know. Like it's hard to hate the Hulk, you know. You know, uh, you know. But so for me, the Avengers movie was just the only thing that was really like the Avengers movie was great, but to me it was Iron Man 3 before they made Iron Man 3. I don't remember all that much special about Iron Man 2, but I remember liking it more than the other early Marvel movies, with the exception of the first Iron Man movie. And a lot of people dump on Iron Man 3 for not being as good as the early ones, but I like that more than the other ones. And after that, it's like I barely paid attention to the Marvel movies. Guardians of the Galaxy seemed okay, you know. I saw the second Avengers movie in the theater because a friend of mine was going to see it. Somebody I used to hang around with. Haven't bothered and don't plan to anytime too soon. But then went to the Ant-Man movie with him. And, that was because he wanted to go see it, and I figured I'd go along. And, you know, the Ant-Man movie was all right. I could take it or leave it. But that was my attitude towards the Marvel movies, as I liked them, but not enough to really care. And that's kind of it, you know. What was interesting though to me is while I'm sure that the Captain Marvel movie, if it doesn't do as well as other Marvel movies, you can tell that the actress is getting ready to call the fans misogynist and crazy crap like that. You can tell because it's already begun even before the movie came out, and people are talking about how the box office predictions for it are dropping the more she does that. And it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Because I mean, if the face of the movie, the main person behind it, is acting like a jackass, then yeah, you're less likely to want to go and see it. But there's a whole lot of other people involved with the movie too. So this is just one person hired to work on a project, you know. So it's kind of like, why let her ruin it for you? But then again, I don't know if it's going to be all that special or not because I'm not all that into the Marvel movies anyway. But the complete opposite was happening. Well, I'm sure Rotten Tomatoes is going to be afraid to give it a bad score. Attila, Battle Angel, didn't dare threaten the fans by daring to make out that they were misogynist. So Rotten Tomatoes just viewed it as, oh, there's another big dumb action movie, and it got a poor score on Rotten Tomatoes. And while I'm not a big fan of big dumb action movies, some movies are thoughtful and interesting. And I actually thought Attila, Battle Angel, I didn't mispronounce her name. Is that how you pronounce her name? But anyway, the new Battle Angel movie. I was really interested in it. Basically, when I saw it being advertised, I was like, oh, they finally made that! Because I read before that Cameron, and it was, I don't even know how I came across it, was thinking about making the movies based on Battle Angel. And I was like, that'd be awesome. Because I remember in college, there was somebody I went to college with. I lent him some of my old VHS cassettes with anime on it. It was Macross Plus, which is absolutely fucking awesome. And he lent me some tapes with a bunch of anime on it. Mine were ones I purchased at HMV. His, I think, were ones that he actually recorded. Like it was a tape with a mix of stuff on it. And but the stuff he lent me, some of it was really awesome. I know one of the things on it was Battle Angel. And this would have probably been, theoretically, it could have been late 1997, but it was probably early 1998. And a cartoon show, which seems unrelated, that I really liked was Extreme Ghostbusters. And I liked the dynamic of an older Egon Spengler training a new cast of characters, which were slightly younger than I was, but close age, both college aged, and really liked that dynamic. I liked the character, and I remember when I started watching Battle Angel, like there's like this old doctor guy, that goes and was like fighting bad, monstrous cyborg things that were stealing parts off of other cyborgs and mutilating people or whatever, something like that. It's been so long since I saw it, I barely remember the idea of it. He had like some sort of weird ass science fiction, I don't know if it was a rocket hammer, what the fuck it was, but some sort of big smashing weapon he had, which wasn't what really I found interesting about him, but he had like technologically enhanced weapons that he carried with him of some sort. But the character reminded me, just the way he looked, of like the aged Egon Spengler of Extreme Ghostbusters, and that kind of got my attention. But I remember really enjoying the storyline, which for some reason I don't remember today. It's been so long that I just barely remember little bits of it, watching and thinking, that's just fucking awesome. I love this show. There was like some anime I can take it or leave it. Some anime is really great. Like I don't like something just because it's a cartoon from Japan. But that one, it got my attention for looking kind of cool. Got my attention a little bit more. Perhaps that maybe helped me get into it. That the one character in it reminded me of Egon Spengler. But I also liked the other characters. And the main character, Attila? I forget how you pronounce her name. But the character Battle Angel, and in that version of it, the title was just Battle Angel. And I think if you actually get the books, because a friend of mine years later, was working at a recycle depot in the city. We technically live out here in the middle of nowhere, but one of the times he was spending time in the city, he got a chance to pick up the books that were being discarded from the library. And apparently, if you get the comic book adaptation, the original manga version, it was called Battle Angel Attila, or Attila, whichever. It was actually what was on the title. Her name was after Battle Angel. And I remember he got that. It was showing me some of the books he got. Picked up some Star Trek stuff and some Star Wars stuff, and probably some Buffy the Vampire Slayer books and stuff like that. It was like, oh shit, man, that's fucking awesome! You got Battle Angel. You get a comic book novelization, graphic novel, trade paperback of the Battle Angel. That's fucking awesome. So I'm really looking forward to checking out that movie if I ever get around to it, which I should. I should make effort because it looks cool. I really want to check out the anime again sometime. That's something I must do. But I want to check out that movie. But yeah, I mean, it looks cool. And Rotten Tomatoes gave it a bad review. They had no reason to give it a good review. I don't think they judged it on itself. They're just like, there's no agenda to give it a good review. So they gave it, I think it was more than 50%. So technically, I guess they said it wasn't painful to watch. I guess, it's more than 50%, but it was generally a bad review. It didn't go over well. Well, the fans are loving it, more than 90%. When the professional reviewers at Rotten Tomatoes, which are just lame to begin with, when they say something's, like less than 60%, that's not a hint that it's good or bad. It just means that those jackasses don't have an agenda worth pretending it's good or bad, And the audience has been loving it, and that's something that was going over or getting referenced online, that Rotten Tomatoes is like obsolete nonsense. And I just found that interesting because Battle Angel Attila, I loved watching that so long ago, and it's something that pops in my mind as something I really enjoyed. But I still don't know how to pronounce the main character's name, and I just heard it being pronounced earlier today. Battle Angel Attila, Attila the Battle Angel. Attila. Must be Attila. Attila? I don't know. But anyway, it's getting a great audience score, which is a hint that's probably good. I mean, sometimes a massive number of people love crap. I mean, Independence Day is a painfully lame movie to watch. But, it made a lot of money and a lot of people seem to love it. God damn, that was bad. Transformers movies criticized for being bad, and I say they're horrible, but the live action ones anyway. The animated one was awesome. But, but they make a lot of money, but I don't think they get good scores on Rotten Tomatoes, though. I don't know. I never looked it up. I didn't consider Rotten Tomatoes worth acknowledging. Rotten Tomatoes gave Ghostbusters 2016, that certified it as fresh. And that's how you know something's bullshit. They certified Star Trek Discovery as fresh. I should go rent, if I thought to bring out the DVD. Star Trek Discovery was certified fresh. And that would be about as fresh. Here's how fresh Star Trek Discovery is. Granted, it's not as bad as Star Trek 2009, but it's still about as fresh as a dumpster fire. A dumpster fire full of waste that came from an apartment building where the sewage system has been blocked off, and people have been going directly into their garbage can because their toilets aren't working, and it's been building up in the dumpster. And the city wouldn't take it away because it's not just rotting trash and food and scraps and general garbage, but there's also pretty much sewage in the dumpster. And they wouldn't take it away. So somebody decided to throw, something lit on fire and some gasoline into the thing. So basically, Rotten Tomatoes is as fresh as burning feces, urine, and rotting garbage. That's how fresh. That's the freshness of Star Trek Discovery. Now, rather than going with an absurdly long and disgusting metaphor for how bad Star Trek Discovery is, I could just review the series as a whole. I could. That would take longer than we have to go over all the things wrong with that show. Yeah. Needless to say, I don't have a good opinion of Star Trek Discovery. But that's my random off-topic whatever. And the thing is, Battle Angel Atla. I'm hoping that's a good movie because I want to go and see it because I want to go and rewatch the anime. And I just thought it was funny because you can tell that they're getting ready to call anybody who complains about the Captain Marvel movie, sexist and misogynist, and the Battle Angel movie has a main protagonist who's female, and it's going over great with the general population of moviegoers who like, science fiction, fantasy, anime, and that sort of stuff. Going over great with them. It's being loved by people. So, but if those same people decide that they don't like, Ghostbusters 2016 or Star Trek Discovery, and probably the same thing will happen with Captain Marvel. They'll be called misogynist by the same people that didn't like Battle Angel because political agendas, people trying to make themselves look important and whatever. Yep. But anyway, yeah, that's one of the things. It's just as I was coming online, I had noticed there was a new video from the Anti-Trekker saying, referencing that he's going to be talking about the Captain Marvel movie, and I don't know his opinions on it yet. And also something came up by Secular Talk. Secular Talk is great. I mean, Secular Talk, Kyle Kalinske, he talks about political and a lot of political and social issues, and he's delightfully left wing. Um, and I like how he criticizes the right wings people for being snowflakes. There's been like this movement where the right wing is suddenly pretending that it's anti-censorship, and the right wing has traditionally been the more censoring. Tell a bunch of people on the right wing side of things that their God isn't real, and they'll try to censor you any way, shape, or form. And okay, this is not bringing up all the recent notifications because all right, there's something that Pepper did, but and that there's something from YouTube and yeah, whatever. But anyway, there was a Secular Top video that looked like just came up, and it looks like let's see, I exit out of that. Come on, get out of there, get out of there, get out of there, get out of there. All right, just moving through the menus. Let's see. Yeah, all right, breaking news. Bernie officially launches 2020 campaign. Well, that's good news. The United States could use a decent politician actually rising to the level of power of president. The last time that happened, last time a remotely decent human being rose to the level of president was Jimmy Carter. George H. Bush, not something I'd recommend. Be in control of a lot of power, but the original George Bush, at least he had the smarts to refer to trickle down economics as a bad thing. Here's the problem with trickle down economics: they did it upside down. The more money the people have, the more they spend on businesses, and the more that the rich pricks can make profit off of them. You give it directly to the rich pricks get extra rich, but it doesn't actually trickle down. The only trickling down is the rich people urinating on the poor people that they can get away with. So the one good thing I could think about George H. Bush was he wasn't bought off to the point where he could actually pretend that trickle down economics is a good thing. Bill Clinton, the era of Bill Clinton, when the last two guys were George H. Bush and Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton can look pretty good by comparison. When he's followed up by George W. Bush, he can look pretty good. And the Clintons in general became more and more corrupt since then, but even Bill Clinton wasn't that great. And Obama started off with a lot of potential, said a lot of the right things, kind of like Bernie Sanders did, but not quite as good as Bernie Sanders does it, but, close to it. He said a lot of good things, and then he didn't live up to them. Part of it could be the job. I think it was the guys from South Park, one of the times when they had a legitimately thoughtful moment was when they referred to isn't the whole point of their democratic system that the president doesn't really have the power to change things? I could give Obama a little leeway for failing to be all that good. And he was a lot better than what came before him, but it's like, nah, by the end of those 8 years, just another war criminal. And then he was followed up by an election between the most cartoonish sellout warmonger who sold out the good of her own people and the lives of a lot of foreigners, going up against the most ridiculous buffoonish alternate option that they could have put her up against. And now there's a whole lot of buffoonery. The last time that we saw a good politician in the United States rise to the level of president and have, was when somehow, names are not loading. The one guy, the guy that's actually surprisingly seems to be a decent human being. What's his name? Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was actually a decent human being. The rest of them were all like scum. And, but Bernie Sanders spent his life doing good things. So, if you're going to have somebody in control of a large nation that a lot of people are going to depend on the political decisions, and then the fact that it's potentially murdering massive numbers of people around the world, the nation itself, the wars it's involved with and all that illegal nonsense. It's like, good. That's good news. Bernie is running. I hope somebody doesn't assassinate him. Which sounds like crazy conspiracy theory, but I don't know. That's a good sign. That's a good sign. Bernie is running, and that's a good thing. Bernie has legitimately stood up for people who need standing up for throughout his career, even before it was popular, even before it became an out-of-touch concept that people have been doing with a regressive amount of bigotry and insanity. The social justice warrior movement's what I'm thinking of. And holy crap, the world needs Bernie Sanders. That's good. That's good. It's hard to say. It's hard to say if the political system will allow him to do any good. But I thought that was good news. But just before I went online, it's like Bernie officially announces his campaign, and that's good. That is good. And so that's good. That's good. The Battle Angel Atla thing, that's also good too. And that movie's doing well, and it looks interesting to me. And it's just another sign that Rotten Tomatoes is an obsolete bit of nonsense. Now, I'm going to bring up some just random on-screen activity while I go to the bathroom. Yes, I'm going to go to the bathroom. Hey, what's this one? It's nothing special. All right, I'm going to go to the old, there we go. Activity on the screen. It's bubbles. Actually, this thing's probably so low res, probably can't even tell the difference, but I'll be back. Living off cans of pop and energy drink are not good for standing in front of a camera for a long time. There we go. There we go, and this thing's still alive, amazingly enough. There we go. Now I'm back. I'm back from firing the phase cannon down the porcelain wormhole. Excuse me. And of course I'm full of carbonated beverage, because this is what allows me to wake up and look at a world full of humans. Humans. Well, the main thing I wanted to focus on when I was doing the live video log, in fact, it's in the thumbnail I put up for this damn video, was I was going to talk about Star Trek Discovery and the Orville, the two most recent episodes. I don't remember the title of the Discovery episode. I don't even remember the number of it. I just know it's the most recent one, which would have aired on, I'm looking at the calendar right now. Well, today is the 19th. Today's the 19th. So the episode that aired on the 14th. Oh, that was Valentine's Day. Huh. Wow. Valentine's Day. The episode that aired on the 14th. The Valentine's Day episode of both Star Trek Discovery and the Orville. And I'm going to get to Star Trek Discovery first, because it's the hardest for me to remember, because it was like, I don't care. But I do care because it's Star Trek. It's Star Trek, so I'm interested. And, I want to make my opinion. I'm going to state my opinions, and then they'll be on the internet, and I can say that I've done that, And the Orville was awesome. All right, I'm gonna focus on Star Trek Discovery first, but the Orville was awesome. Okay. Yeah, the Orville. I'll just say this much about the Orville before I really get to talking about it. There was an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. I believe the title of it was The Outcast, and I love Star Trek: The Next Generation. One of my all-time favorite television shows. Now, perhaps I like Babylon 5 a little bit more. I like Deep Space Nine about close to the same as The Next Generation. I like Babylon 5 a little bit more. I like House MD maybe a little bit more. It's been a while since I watched House MD, but maybe a little more. Star Trek Enterprise is my all-time favorite television show, but Next Generation is high on the list. Love it. When I first got into watching Star Trek, there were 3 main seasons that were in reruns. The first 3 in Next Generation and all 3 of the original series. And it was Next Generation won me over even more than the original series. It was back in 1991 when I started watching Star Trek. And of course, there was like new episodes on television, but the episodes I was seeing repeated the most, I think, were seasons 1, 2, and 3 at that time. And 2 was kind of a weak point, but 1 was great, and 3 was awesome, for Next Generation. Well, with the original series, I didn't like the original series as much as Next Generation Season 1, but I liked it mostly more than Next Generation Season 2. But even with the original series, I probably liked the original series Season 3 less than Next Generation Season 2. And with the original series, Season 1 was the greatest. But I loved me some Star Trek right from the start. But The Outcast was a bit of a failed episode. And I'll get into that later. It's kind of like The Orville, which has many of the people who worked on Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek Voyager, and most of all, Star Trek Enterprise. Many people from Star Trek Enterprise just went right over to The Orville, over a decade later. But, when they came back to make it science fiction on television, it was the Orville. And I love Star Trek Enterprise. And the Orville is just fucking great. But this reminds me of this is a lot like a Next Generation episode. But the Next Generation episode, as much as I love those old episodes in the Next Generation, this was a bit of a failed episode, The Outcast. And I feel like the Orville didn't just take the idea and fix it. The Orville blew it out of the fucking water. And once again, we keep getting better and better and better from the Orville. We go from great to better and better and better. It's like playing the game Xenogears. It's like, wow, this game is good. Wow, this game is better. And you keep you spend like 60 hours playing a game, and it's like, holy crap, it just keeps getting better. Of course, with Xenogears, then you get to the last section of the game, and you can tell they kind of rushed that, and they kind of broken it down into little chapters that just kind of get narrated to you with just bits with the gameplay taking place across different sections of the last part of the story. And that feels a little bit weak, relatively speaking. But Xenogears was a game that I played. I don't know how it managed to just keep getting better and better, but it was made by some real smart people. The Orville, made by the people involved with Star Trek Enterprise and the people involved with Family Guy and the Cleveland Show and so forth. When they got together, they made fucking gold, because this show's fucking awesome. I mean, the guys at South Park, were really well known for shitting on the creative team behind Family Guy, and And some of the people, not the creator of The Simpsons, but some of the people that worked on The Simpsons supposedly did that a bit too. And the lame douches behind King of the Hill, I mean, King of the Hill's had some good moments, but it was like drowsy crap, mostly. I mean, they kind of like shat all over Family Guy and the people behind it, you know. But at their best, they ain't done nothing that touched the Orville. Uh, I mean, the Orville's just fucking awesome. And this most recent episode is. I mean, I'm just rambling on about how fucking good it was, but that was that. And I've had that reaction to a lot of episodes this season. Like the episode before this one was like kind of like the one that focused on Data having a relationship, only even better, and taking aspects of it, turning them around from a different angle, different perspective, but just being awesome, you know? I'm just looking at the time, just wondering. Oh, I could look at this. How long have I been rambling? It doesn't matter. So, yeah. But on to Star Trek Discovery. And I made some notes trying to think of stuff that I could mention about the most recent episode of Star Trek Discovery. What we have is a continuation of the Spore Drive story, where Tully gets taken into the Spore network. And, yeah, I'm going to give away spoilers here. But was that on that? No, wasn't on this thing. When did I get notification? Oh, cool. Katrina tweeted something. Huh. Ooh, cool. Very hot picture from that person on Twitter. They're always posting cool stuff on Instagram, so that I followed them on Twitter, and it's like, yeah, cool. All right. Anyway, all right. Discovery. Oh, one good thing about the most recent episode of Discovery is they brought back a good character. Good character on a bad show, you know, whatever. Let's see. Oh, yeah. All right. So that's a plot line in it. They brought back a good character. Still bad stories, you know, that the character exists within. So should that really matter if the stories are just going to be, you know, this stuff? All right. At first, it looked like they were coming up with an excuse to no longer use the Spore Drive, as if using the Spore Drive was upsetting the Spore network in a way that they were going to become raging monsters that were going to rage through space and get angry, you know. Kind of like Third Space Aliens and that one made for TV, made for DVD movie. No, made for TV. It was before DVDs. Made for TV movie that Babylon 5 did, you know, Third Space. You know, I could picture the Spore network getting, you know, fed up with, you know, the use of the Spore Drive, and, you know, something about it was harmful to them, that they were in a parallel universe, you know, and they decided to rage destructive war on the regular universe, and then they had to hide all references to that technology and hope that nobody ever did it again and unleash those monstrosities on the universe, or maybe they'd seal their universe off from the main or from that Star Trek universe. Because, you know, that's one of my excuses for why Star Trek Discovery is different in my own mind. One of the things that I think could make Star Trek Discovery, it still doesn't work, but work better, is that the reason why things are so different in Star Trek Discovery is this is a universe that somehow the spores have connected to, and they're just an alternate version of the universe, an alternate version of the timeline that's been affected by the spores affecting the timeline. I don't know, but the spores, I don't think the spores should be connected to every Star Trek universe, and I don't think they should exist in the traditional Star Trek universe. They're just wrong. They're just a bad idea. But anyway, but yeah, at first I was thinking this whole thing with this angry, evil spore creature screwing with Tilly's mind, I thought it was going to be like, oh, well, they've unleashed a monster, so this is going to lead to the story where the Spore Drive has to go away. Nope. We learned that the spore creatures are really, really absurdly fucking stupid. You see, this phantom version of the Doctor from the first season of Discovery, got pulled into the Spore Network, and the Spore Network kind of granted him knowledge of what was going on with the Spore Network, so he could guide what's his name, Stamets, and let him know what was going on and explain things to him. That's what happened in those episodes. Somehow this guy was in there either as a ghost or as something looking like him, but he was dead in the real life. And this episode established that it was actually his mind and a copy of his body pulled into that world by Stamets himself when he was grieving over the guy's death. Somehow his connection to the Spore Network granted him knowledge that allowed Stamets to help Stamets out in that whole mirror universe incident. Okay, so this guy seems to have a really great connection to the Spore Network. Turns out, no, the Spores don't know what to do with him. He's just running around in the Spore Network being eaten by them, and he discovered that covering himself with poison from some sort of weird trees in the Spore Network will keep the spores from trying to consume him. But the spores hate him. They think he's a dangerous, evil murderer because he won't let them eat them. Now, they don't seem to think the trees are evil, crazy murderers, but they think he is because he coats himself with poison to protect himself from him. It's like, how do they have enough knowledge to communicate with other beings, grant this guy the knowledge that they gave him when they did, and then not realize what they're doing is wrong? I mean, this is standard grade stupidity for Star Trek Discovery. From season 1 right till now, from the first episode. I mean, the first episode, the opening scene involved them dealing with a storm that blocked out the sky, that to the point where even subspace communications couldn't go through it. Or maybe their things just work on radio waves. But I'd say their communicators probably advanced enough that they work with subspace frequencies at this point. They couldn't even communicate through the clouds. The storm overhead was so bad. But somehow walking a little path in the sand, that doesn't get blown in by the blowing winds, and this ship can see them walk this path. Like, right from the start, there was, absurd nonsense. It doesn't get better. It doesn't get better. It's like, what the fuck is wrong with these people? Alright, brought back a character. Here's a glitch of the story I had issue with. Okay, apparently, if you got yourself into the Spore Network universe, like the ship kind of sticks itself half in one universe, half in the other. Oh, I haven't even mentioned Section 31. Oh, should I even rant about that? It's so stupid. No, alright, anyway. Alright, let's just... Alright. The ship sticks itself half in one universe, half in the other. And there's actually a transitional barrier, that the ship ends up stuck through like an open anomaly in space. Now, one of the things I had issue with was they said, don't touch the barrier or it'll cause you to get splayed and torn all apart, kind of like it did to the people on the starship Glenn, the sister ship to the Discovery. Okay. Why? Why would it twist them all apart? And here's why I'm questioning why. I'm okay with an anomaly being dangerous to human beings and all that. But here's the thing. That anomaly was halfway through the ship. Why is it that just humanoids? It just does it to humanoids. Granted, the walls of the ship are probably, stronger than, humanoid flesh and so forth. But there's all kinds of things throughout the ship that little line of this space or that space would have been passing through. Shouldn't it have just torn apart and twisted a shit ton of stuff? I mean, if there was somebody's coffee cup, shouldn't there be coffee exploding all over the place because this twists and destroys and does crazy stuff to things, And there's all sorts of things on the ship. probably should have been vulnerable to this, because it's like, yeah, human beings aren't the most durable object ever, like lots of plastics are tougher than human flesh, so forth, but like that line went through the whole ship, and shouldn't that have been a crazy amount of problem for a crazy amount of things throughout the ship? Just saying, that seemed pretty fucked up, Okay, the Section 31 thing, I didn't even write that down as a note. Deep Space Nine introduced Section 31. Now, if you know a lot about Gene Roddenberry's philosophy on the future, it was probably a moment where they had a lot of arguments amongst themselves, because it was known that Rick Berman was pretty reluctant to add things that specifically violated Gene Roddenberry's rules. And here's one of Gene Roddenberry's outlooks on the future was, remember how Gene Roddenberry was known for disapproving of Star Trek V? If you look it up, Gene Roddenberry's thoughts on Star Trek VI, he also disapproved of Star Trek VI. It's a great movie, and I love it. But I also know why Gene Roddenberry disapproved of it, and while I'm glad we have the movie and I love Star Trek VI, I can understand why Star Trek VI Grumpy Old Man didn't go over perfectly with Gene Roddenberry, because when the Klingons and the Federation conspired to keep themselves at war, and Valeris did the underhand things that she did, this was not how human beings and other humanoids who have come to that level of philosophical advancement would have handled their problems. So it's on record for arguments between, I think it was Harve Bennett and Gene Roddenberry. Harve Bennett said, Gene Roddenberry said the character wouldn't do that, and Harve Bennett's like, well, I made the character, I know what she would do. Like there were arguments behind the scenes about it, and Gene Roddenberry didn't have enough control over the franchise to prevent Star Trek VI from being made. He also didn't have enough control over the franchise to keep Star Trek V from being made. And don't get me wrong, I love Star Trek VI, but I also understand why, that it wasn't what Gene Roddenberry wanted. And so I'm kind of mindful of things that violate his rules, especially that one, about how human beings would act in the future. That certain things, they just beyond. Excuse me. Now, Section 31 is a whole lot of sneaky, underhanded things going on to benefit the Federation. Now, granted, their excuse is that it's only invoked in extreme times of need, but it's still, sneaky and underhanded. That said, I love the idea in many ways, but I every time I think of it, I think of that it's just something that I always want to keep in perspective. That I'd love to see more done with Section 31, but I think the disapproval of other characters around them is also an important aspect of how Section 31 is handled, especially in the Next Generation era, because this is supposed to be the era of the original series, only they've moved on even more into the future. So any imperfections in humanity that, by Gene Roddenberry's standards, which I happen to kind of agree with as a way humanity should evolve, any imperfections against Gene Roddenberry's rules that were left in the original series, I do believe, when stories take place in the Next Generation, they should kind of evolve beyond certain conflicts, certain internal conflicts, and Section 31 is one of those things that's in that gray area of, I like it, it's established canon now, but it's kind of like, ooh, that kind of pushed the limits on, what was supposed to be done according to the rules of this universe, according to the universe's creator, Gene Roddenberry, That said, I do like Section 31 as a concept, and when they were introduced in Deep Space Nine, they were legitimately interesting stories. But the one thing about Section 31, other than the fact that they were generally disapproved of by most of the characters of the show, that the actions of Section 31, was the fact that they worked in secret. Almost nobody knew about them. Some of the people who were complacent probably didn't entirely know everything about them, and they completely worked in secret. Now, Star Trek Enterprise, which took place 100 years before the original series, where this sort of problem is the sort of thing that should have been ironed out then, I think it was a very appropriate thing to bring into Enterprise. And it was established they were there right from the beginning of Starfleet Charter, and Starfleet, before it became a major organization... Oh, one of the heaters doing something. Oh, it's just letting me know that it's turning off. It's been on for a while. Anyway, Section Starfleet, it was there since the beginning of Starfleet, and they referenced Section 31 by basically being a secretive group working for the benefit of Earth and Earth's allies, who were taking extreme measures when extreme situations were presenting themselves. And that was part of Starfleet's original charter. It was Article, what was it? Article 14, Section 31. Thus where the name Section 31 came from. And personally, both Deep Space Nine and Enterprise, I felt, handled it very well. And once it was established canon by Deep Space Nine, then it actually, in my opinion, it was very smart of them to include it in Enterprise. And I also thought they were handled very well by Enterprise. Now they've brought them into Discovery. Now, right from Season 1, there was a reference to black badges, which were not stated to be Section 31. But you know what? If the black badges were involved with Section 31, but they were officially just things that, if somebody's wearing a black badge, they're involved with a top secret project. Because the Federation and Starfleet being an organization within the Federation, they do have, secrets. They have scientific and military developments like weapons science and stuff like that. Okay, it's fine, okay? Somebody with a black badge might be working on certain projects that might be top secret. If you're a field agent going out amongst the population to gain information and you're wearing a black badge, you just gave your cover away. But that said, if you're doing business on a research ship and you have the black badge on, maybe that's a sign. Look, don't ask the person too many questions. They're doing something specific. I don't know. You could come up with excuses for it. Like an FBI badge or something like that indicates they have special clearance to be doing some crazy shit. Okay, fine. This, more recently, out and out has tried to establish the black badges to be full-blown indications of Section 31. They have people talking about Section 31. No indication that they just learned about Section 31 by accident. They have a Starfleet admiral talking about Section 31 like it's a major department within Starfleet that's just regularly accepted, It'd be kind of like, if you were in the FBI and then they wanted the CIA to work with you, on some sort of project for the United States government. If there was a movie that had a story like that the CIA and the FBI were working together. It's almost like they're a separate department within Starfleet, but it's still. They were supposed to be the super secretive whatever. And theoretically, they could be known about by a few people at that time and then go back into secrecy. I suppose when the Maquis came into existence in Star Trek, they didn't need to say that in human history the name had been used before by anybody, but, they didn't need to explain the reference, the name, anything like that. Well, the same thing, is like when Section 31 came about in Deep Space Nine, or were discovered in Deep Space Nine. It's kind of like, it could be that, there were rumors of something before, but nothing that, was ever still taken serious in that day and age. But still, it's just absurdly inappropriate to something that was written as being so incredibly secretive. It, it just kind of like violates the whole concept. And there's just, well, I've used this metaphor a lot ever since I remember when I got into the Batman cartoons back in the 1990s, like the good Batman cartoons, you know. There's something I thought of. One of the most absurd things that Batman has is the Batmobile. Not that it's a bad vehicle, especially that version of it was actually cool. But the thing is, every time Batman goes out in a car, he takes the Batmobile. Okay, but Batman's basically a fucking ninja. Okay, his thing is hiding in the dark, striking fast with a maximum amount of agility, being incredibly strong, peak human strength, you know, but also peak human agility, you know, hiding, being stealthful. And here he is driving around in a vehicle that, well, it's not a bright color that's going to show up distinctly. If you see the Batmobile, you know Batman's either been there and left or he's coming back for it. You know, it's the fucking Batmobile. You know, I was watching an animated Batman movie the other day, the one that, the animated version of The Killing Joke, and somebody shoots the Batmobile with a missile, and I thought, you know what? Every time criminals see the Batmobile, you know, it's like, yeah, I mean, if this had been just a car sneaking up somewhere, driving into an area, you know, it would have been different. I mean, if I were to design the character of Batman, yeah, maybe having a Batmobile for certain circumstances would make sense. Like that. But the thing that would make the most sense is to take a couple different examples of the most common car type, have them happen to have a very dark paint job, have the windows reinforced with bulletproof glass, have the whole thing underneath the outer layers reinforced with some sort of ridiculously expensive technology that Bruce Wayne can afford, like armor the hell out of them without making them look armored. And you'd cruise around in that. You know, it might have like kind of tinted windows so nobody can see in. But the thing is, you want to blend in, and the Batmobile doesn't blend in. So I always thought the Batmobile was kind of like this absurd idea. It's like, you know, if he only whipped it out in special occasions, when he needs like a vehicle that extreme, it makes sense. But at the same time, he's sneaking around the city in a vehicle that definitely probably hasn't, you know, undergone a motor vehicle inspection by the proper authorities, you know. Probably hasn't been licensed for the highway, so even the cops should have issues with it, you know, at first sight, you know. And it's like a comically obvious thing. So I always thought the Batmobile was like an absurd idea. As much as I like the character Batman and all that, that's what I always think of when I see the Batmobile. That fucking thing stands out. He should have like a fleet of cars, you know, some Honda Civics, some Cavaliers, some Sunfires, some Corollas and Tercels and Nissans, you know, like normal looking cars, but then underneath the fenders and all that, just be armor plated underneath the fenders, and like have it somehow enhanced. I mean, the Batmobile is kind of like ridiculously expensive technology to begin with, you know, like it should be something that blends in. Just saying that, you know. But it doesn't. Which I always thought, you know, affects the storytelling of that reality. Well, Section 31 now has their own special badges. Everybody talks about them like it's no big deal. It's like, that defeats the purpose of Section 31. Anyway, that's my thought on that episode. Storytelling wise, it doesn't fit in well with Star Trek, as usual for Discovery. Little things like that, you know. But, yeah, I don't know what to say in the favor of the episode. I mean, character moments, this was an episode that was actually starting to make me like Mirror Universe Giorgio a bit. Giorgio? I forget how you pronounce her name. I actually liked the regular universe version of the character that we had in the first 2 episodes. I mean, the episodes were written badly. The way they were written was basically seemed like you wanted to hate the primary protagonist, which was her first officer, but her herself I thought was still a good character. Saru was a good character, and the other characters are kind of there. Like, that's about it for the entire first season. My God, I mean that was a bad show. I mean, I've gotten some entertainment out of it. I'm not going to completely say that it was a waste of time for me to watch it. In fact, I might even watch it again. In that same way that, a show comes on that's, like, sometimes there'll be a show on television that's just bad, and you can watch it and be kind of like, oh God, that could have been so much better. But, I got a little bit of amusement out of something here. With Star Trek Discovery, it gets some reference to phase cannons and phasers and some stuff like that, which makes me think, oh, wow, yeah. But it's not really good, one of the high points for me with Star Trek Discovery was seeing the ship that they had as the main ship for the first 2 episodes before things switched over to being actually on the Starship Discovery. The Walker class starship. I love the design of the Walker class starship. Yeah. And although I disagree with the idea that the holograms are too advanced for the time period, I think that the holograms are absurd for the time period. I don't think it's something they can't do or shouldn't be able to do. I think it's something that they wouldn't do just because it's an absurdly awkward way of communicating. And, I think that's a technology they probably could have pulled off before Enterprise. These are not holograms advanced like the Doctor and Voyager or even the holodeck in Next Generation. These are, crude, almost transparent holograms, not much more advanced than what you see in Star Trek 3. There's like some people playing a game in a bar with some sort of holograms in Star Trek 3 for a brief second. I mean, they're just tiny little holograms on the tabletop, but, like this, all you need is the capability of generating a hologram and some sort of communication system at all. And you could, do this. But the way they implement it, it's like convoluted. Somebody must be in some sort of holographic chamber somewhere else because they're like walking around the room looking at things. And it's like the idea barely works out if you think about it for a couple seconds. It's convoluted. It's like, why would you go to that much effort to communicate with somebody when you could just have a view screen come up and, hey there, Captain Crunch, It's like, it doesn't belong. I disagree with the idea that it's too advanced. I don't think it's too advanced. I just think it's inappropriate. And but what I did think was too advanced was just about every ship has far more force field technology than the Constitution class starship will get for years. I mean, everybody else has a force field holding in the atmosphere in their shuttle bay. The Constitution class starships still be decompressing and repressurizing their shuttle bays to take on and release shuttles. And then there's also the get a hull breach and the whole ship is like force fields for a little bit. Sure, that technology is appropriate in the Next Generation. Maybe even, the later part of the movie era for the original series movies, but not 10 years before the original series itself. Like that show was full of legitimate canon violations that are just convoluted and don't work very well. And while I've often criticized people for people over-exaggerated Enterprise on its things that they felt contradicted canonical Star Trek that has already been established. Personally, I don't like to be too insulting with this video, but I think a lot of people who criticized Enterprise, I mean, the series is, all Star Trek shows have legitimate criticisms, but I thought a lot of what was said about Enterprise was just plain stupid. Like, absurdly stupid. With Star Trek Discovery, it's like, no, this. And Yeah, just checking how long I've been rambling on about this. Like Star Trek Discovery really does contradict things. I mean, as soon as somebody saw a Suliban ship cloak in Enterprise, they're like, "Oh, there's cloaking devices back then. Nobody ever heard of one before the Romulans did it in that episode of the original series." Especially most of that episode of the original series, they were crapping themselves over the fact that the Romulans had this amazing plasma torpedo. I know, because I watched the hell of that episode, because that was one of my favorite episodes of the original series. And the reference to the cloaking device was, how did it disappear like that? And then Spock did the usual Star Trek thing and just gave the generic workings of an idea on how a cloaking device could work. It's like, how many times do we hear how a transporter works? How many times do we hear nanites being explained by one person to another person when both people should know full well what a nanite is? You know, that sort of thing. You know, like that line doesn't mean nobody has ever cloaked before or gone invisible. In fact, in the next season, which I believe was before the Federation ever even stole a Romulan cloaking device, but because I think that was early in season 3. But at the end of season 2, we actually have an episode where they traveled back in time to Earth, the Gary 7 episode, and they reference using their shields to make the ship invisible to the people of the time period. So what does that tell me? It tells me the shields on a starship at that time in the era of the original series could be used to make a ship invisible. It probably wouldn't trick contemporary sensors at the time, so if somebody did it successfully and tricked the Enterprise, they'd be like, how did that ship disappear? And it's like, even if they were, you know, that sign, even if, like, all right, just, not sure how to word this, but basically, we know that cloaking devices aren't the only way a ship could disappear. Like, we've seen Interspace make the Starship Defiant, not the Defiant class Starship Defiant, but the Constitution class Defiant, disappear. Like, there could be technologies where vehicles travel by disappearing like that, and that have been merely rumored that Starfleet can't do. Like over one little line like that, it's like, yeah, we all assumed nobody ever seen a cloaking device before that, but it's such a general technology, the idea that nobody could have done it, you know. To me, it just means that they weren't expecting anybody to be able to trick their sensors like that, because personally, I got the impression that if the Suliban tried to cloak in front of a Vulcan ship in the time period of Enterprise, the Vulcans would probably still see them. That they wouldn't disappear unless somebody was looking out the window. So, you know, the fact that they were able to hide from the Enterprise, the NX-01 Enterprise, you know, I just got, like, for me, it was never a problem because it was immediately reconcilable within the whole context. Now, what was a stretch in Enterprise that I thought was a bad idea, and they kind of fixed it later, was the fact that they actually had a Romulan ship actually disappear, which seemed to have a slightly enhanced version of the Suliban cloak, which the Romulans never use again, for reasons that were never explained, but then again, we only get 4 seasons of Enterprise. And we never saw everything that went on behind the scenes with the Romulans. I mean, there could have been potential story there, but I don't know. But yeah, I did think that was a fair bit of a stretch and a bad idea when they actually had a Romulan ship use a cloaking device in Enterprise. But when they said it about the Suliban, it's like, no, bitch, what the fuck you talking about? You know, when I see people whine about that online, it's like, God damn, fuckers. You know, you're taking things too far. And that's what I feel. I feel like the material shouldn't be untouchable. Shouldn't be viewed as untouchable. It's like, no, I mean, like there are definitely some complaints I had about Enterprise, but for the most part, they weren't that much. And compared to other Star Trek shows, they really weren't that many bad complaints I had about it. But with Discovery, it's like bad writing, then plot point that's incompatible with Star Trek in the past, which you could reconcile, but you know, not easily, then another plot point that's hard to reconcile, then another plot point that's hard to reconcile, then another plot point that's hard to reconcile, then another plot point, and you think this next plot point's going to make things easier to reconcile, and no, it makes existing plot points even harder to reconcile, even with previous episodes of the same show. Like, Discovery is a convoluted mess of nonsense. And I'm just rambling on about that when I wanted to talk about the Orville and, well, the various cans of soda I had earlier today had already worked their way to my bladder. This energy drink is working its way there. And I will be back after I fire the old phase cannon down the porcelain wormhole. So, if you're viewing this at a high enough resolution you can see bubbles, keep on watching. I'll be back. Alright, I'm back. Alright. Actually, before I move on to the Orville, let's see, turn off the bubbles. There, turned off that visual effect. Alright, just kind of there we go. Alright. That last change, I think, just affected things on my end. And let's see, oh yeah, still, everything's looking fine there. I will comment on another nitpick I had on people's nitpicks on Star Trek. Since I'm talking about... Like I said, I think Star Trek, everybody thinks Star Trek Discovery doesn't work very well as a Star Trek show. Just doesn't. Doesn't work well as a show on its own. Here's something when I thought people nitpicked a little too much. Now, there, I got these models here. Well, it's a Galaxy class star and an NX class starship. I got the two models, and it's a very kind of shaky little base that they're both on. But here's one thing: when they came out with the Sovereign class starship, which, you know, compared to the Galaxy class, it looked a lot more like the Constitution. Like, it was like a longer overall shape, and the nacelles were a little bit higher than the saucer section rather than being lower than the saucer section. You know, nobody was kind of dumb enough to interpret it as, oh, gee, looks like they went backwards. That's shaped more like a Constitution class. That's more primitive technology. Nobody was dumb enough to say that. Well, probably somebody was, but nobody did that. You realize that the ship was built for different purposes. The Galaxy class overall was actually bigger, while the Sovereign class was longer, but in every other metric, the Galaxy class was bigger. The Galaxy class was designed to help the Federation build and grow and expand, do researches, help with colonies, all sorts of stuff. The Sovereign class had less of that, was more built for combat, and it stood to reason. In a time period like Next Generation, you want the Federation to grow. You want to do as much good as possible with your starships. You want them to be a pleasant place for the crew to live and things that can help out the various colonies grow, which is both, good from a practical sense of just having a good civilization to outright practical of helping your civilization grow, because then you have a bigger, more prosperous civilization in case something should happen where you need to have more strong, healthy colonies capable of building starships and adding to the economy should you get attacked. But then once you get attacked by forces like the Borg and the Dominion, then you need to start building ships that have less mass and are less dedicated towards the variety of things you were doing before, because now you're in a more desperate situation to get ships built fast that can travel fast and can fight. But everything else is not going to be as big of a priority because you're in a desperate situation dealing with big, heavy threats. So, there's various reasons for why the Sovereign-class starship is different than the Galaxy-class starship, manufactured at a different time. But nobody ever said, well, the shape of it's more like the Constitution, therefore it's not as advanced. It's like, no, it's built at a different time. Now, when the NX came out, it was the Starfleet tradition of having a saucer section and warp nacelles behind the saucer section. And it looks like a more primitively bolted together, but similar shapes as you would see in the original series, but, a little bit different, but I would say it actually looked more primitive, looked more bolted together, while the Constitution class was more seamless. But people looked at, so in my opinion, it looked like something that came before the Constitution class. But people freaked out because it was like a saucer, warp nacelles behind it. It's just the Akara class. I was like, that's not an Akara class. And why would that be? Like, people acted like it was like, because it had that shape of two warp nacelles and a saucer kind of like coming together like that the Akara class and the NX class should be the same level of development. I'm like, that is the stupidest thing I could have thought to hear. Like, there's bad storytelling and then there's bad story interpreting. And to interpret the Star Trek, which goes on, like, I don't know how much about their own warp physics and stuff like that, to think that the difference of, whether you have two warp nacelles connected here and then a saucer in front of it indicates how advanced the ship is. Like, it's like, no. That's bad. That's just a really dumb way to interpret things. But people used to freak out. You'd see it online all the time, freaking out over how much the Constitution, or not the Constitution, how much the NX class looked like the Akara. And it's like, oh, that's so goddamn stupid. That was something like, I don't necessarily agree with every complaint. In fact, there's sometimes, it's like the complaints are so bad, it's like, it's hard not to say, that's just fucking stupid. But it is. Now, here's a really quick and easy in-universe way to explain why the NX-class starship and the Akara-class starship might have looked similar. The NX-class starship was the first Warp 5 starship, the first ship to be able to travel as far and fast as it could. So the facilities for building large ships had not yet been as established. I mean, maybe they could build a lot of big ships, maybe not. That's not really exactly the point. But they need to build something that would complement a warp drive, which was pushing the technology to the limits to get as fast as it could, because if it wasn't as fast, it wouldn't have functioned well enough for what they wanted it for. So it's kind of like, if you have a motor that's the best motor you can do, and you want a quick moving car, you don't make the car bigger. You make the car smaller. You make the car more simple. And the NX-class starship had just about everything in the sauce in the engineering section. It had that section in the back that worked as kind of like a warp governor, and then it had the two warp nacelles coming up from it. It was a simple design. It was an awesome starship. But it wasn't the same thing as the Akara. Now, why would the Akara go with kind of a simple design? The Akara actually reminded me more of a rearranged... One of the cats was making a noise. Reminded me more of a rearranged Nebula class starship because it had that section that connected that the warp nacelles kind of connected to. Only it was almost like a pod above it. Well, the Akara class was designed to go fast, have a lot of weapons, have a lot of shuttle bays, respond to emergency situations quickly, and be built quickly too. You're not going to waste a lot of extra materials trying to build a bigger ship when you need to get a lot of ships made quickly for threats like the Borg and the Dominion. Like, no, you're not going to build it up bigger and add more space to it. You're going to go with what's the simplest design for getting the ship moving around fast. Like, it's like so very obvious the purpose of, like, when they had ships like the Akara. It made sense, like the whole idea of like the new ships that appeared in Star Trek First Contact and Star Trek Deep Space Nine and to a degree even Voyager. The purpose was the Federation was dealing with a lot of threats, and Starfleet had started to undergo a different design philosophy to respond to those threats. So it should be obvious that the Akara class starship would be something designed to travel as quickly as their technology would allow it to, be as quick and fast to build as possible to get as many of them made, and you'd have a similar philosophy for something like the NX class starship, which was trying to get the best usage possible out of a new and experimental warp drive that was the best that they could do at the time. So it actually makes sense that they would be similar, an overall shape, the two warp nacelles and the saucer section, but I'm almost exhausting myself thinking of how stupid, like, some of the complaints that I've seen aim towards Enterprise over the years. And, like, it contrasts, and I don't want to be like a hypocrite where it's like, well, I thought it was stupid when you complained about this, but now I'm going to complain about Discovery. I have to admit, maybe some of my complaints about Discovery aren't fair, but it's like, no, like, I really strongly think Discovery, like, it's not even consistent with itself, and I don't want to be somebody that just complains. Like, and, I'll give people credit. There are reasons to like Discovery, but there's more reasons to be disappointed with it. I mean, actually, I like the special effects in both Voyager and Enterprise more than Discovery. Even if they're more advanced, they're designed to be viewed in HD or whatever. It's like, what? It doesn't necessarily mean they look better on the screen, but, special effects are one of the things people like about the show. I like that they have some real human language in there, some cursing, a little bit of nudity here and there, Klingon nipples, an Orion with, just wearing kind of like a jockstrap underwear. You get to see his ass, and stuff like that, lot of nudity in Star Trek Discovery, So cursing and nudity. But that alone doesn't make a good show. It lacks the substance that Star Trek normally has. And anyway, speaking of having substance, value, having the creative team that previously worked on Star Trek Enterprise merged with the creative team that worked on Family Guy. I'm going to ramble on about the Orville. Yeah, and I've been rambling for a long time. You see, I was talking about Star Trek Discovery. Now I'm just exhausted. It took the life out of me. It just left me drained. Now, the Orville. Sweet, merciful fuck. The Orville just keeps getting better. And it's not just that it, has like some kick-ass action scenes. In fact, when it comes to action, the Orville's had some okay moments, but I don't really think of it as an action show. Philosophically, thoughtfully, this show, the show deserves even, like, the show has a big, strong fan following, and it still deserves more credit than what it's getting. Now, to talk about an old episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, The Outcast. It was kind of Star Trek's way of saying that they moved beyond homophobia, but without doing anything as, I wouldn't say fourth wall breaking, but as, there would be no reason to bring it up. You know, like characters sitting around talking about, well, you know what's interesting? How we all just have gotten over homophobia. Nobody's homophobic anymore. You know, that would feel disingenuous and, you know, kind of odd, you know. But this episode introduced an androgynous species whose ancestors previously had gender, but I guess they were androgynous enough that as long as they had a group of two, they could reproduce. And the idea of gender began to discuss them. And they had kind of like the equivalents of a homophobia, a form of homophobia, except it wouldn't be homophobia, it would be heterophobia. They had kind of like a heterophobia, I guess you'd call it. You know, anything that wasn't an androgynous pairing, somebody liked to take on the characteristics of a specific gender, was viewed as taboo to them, which came off as awkward, and to a lot of dialogue where Riker and other members of the crew were explaining to this androgynous being that, you know, the human gender characteristics or gender characteristics that were common for humans and other humanoids, which even, I think it was early 90s when that aired. I'm pretty sure that wasn't a repeat from season 3. But, you know, in the early 90s, those gender stereotypes felt very outdated. As a teenager watching the episode for the first time, I was like, oh, God, those gender stereotypes just seem so outdated, you know? It just did. It felt like if this had been done during the era of the original series, you'd be like, well, you know, that was 1960s people talking about gender, you know. But, you know, it felt outdated. It felt awkward. And while Riker was becoming emotionally attached to this androgynous being, other than the fact that they were talking about gender or the characteristics of this androgynous species, you didn't really see a lot of them growing together. It just kind of happened, and it you know, it kind of failed at the drama that it was trying to be. But it was at least an attempt in a time when society was more homophobic and TV executives and people in control of networks had probably wanted to have a homophobic agenda on keeping that sort of thing out of television. For its time, you know, it was an attempt. It was an attempt, but even for its time, when they talked about gender and when they showed the characters getting attached to each other, they could have done better. And, you know, I don't think we should try to justify too much the fact that they did bend to homophobic attitudes to a certain degree and not... it's like Star Trek should have done more stuff like that looked at, you know, how humans react to gender and sexuality and stuff like that, both in the future and in the past. They should have done more reflecting on such issues, and there were other episodes that did such things. Deep Space Nine had a few examples going on in it. Enterprise didn't really do a whole lot with that, but they didn't really have a lot of really great opportunities. Although mentioning things connected to homophobia, they did do an episode that kind of dealt with, 2 decades late, discussing, you know, or parodying, and thus discussing in the traditional Star Trek way, a situation that was similar to how homophobic politicians and homophobic groups kind of didn't give a shit about people with AIDS because homophobia, and that it was a disease that was common amongst the AIDS communities when it first was discovered. What a surprise that a disease like that would be spread amongst people who don't need birth control. You know, it's like, yeah, of course that's where the place is going to show up. But they're going to say God's punishing them. Yeah, your fictional space daddy's functioning, uh, punishing people for having natural sexual urges. Yeah, though. Anyway, mocking the 1980s AIDS crisis, or to be precise, the lame response to it, and not doing a good job of mocking it aside, you know, the Outcast was definitely an awkward, and almost failed attempt at dealing with the subject. The best you could say is at least they took a look at it. At least they did something. Well, I would say the Orville took the idea of that episode of Next Generation. I think it was titled The Outcast, but I never really looked it up to double check that. Took the idea of that Next Generation episode. I could be completely wrong about the title. I remember the episode pretty clearly. Took that idea. Blew it out of the park. I mean, and holy fuck, it was probably one of their best episodes that they had ever done. It started off with the Mocklins, and the Mocklins are, by most standards, an androgynous species. I think they were going for like a version of toxic masculinity. I don't know, because they made the Mocklins single-gendered, but all male. But the Mocklins must have had a unique biology that didn't require two separate genders to reproduce. And the Mocklins viewed their females as less strong than their males, so they eventually all became homosexual, and their females were basically almost like they were bred out of existence, and were shunned to the point that they would do gender reassignment surgery on the rare and few females that were still born. However that works, I don't know. And that's already been dealt with. How the Mocklins, many Mocklins anyway, have a very sexist attitude towards women. And to be honest, at first it almost came off like this was going to be like some social justice warrior nonsense. But they actually made the Mocklins a thoughtful and interesting species with a very flawed and horrible belief, you know. But they actually put some thought into it, some complexity. And while the Mocklins are definitely not a good example, they did make them somewhat complicated. And you can see Bortus as an open-minded, intelligent individual who often disagrees with his own culture. And in this episode, you're presented with Bortus's ex-boyfriend, whom had a sexual attraction to females. And when he discovered that, they broke up. Bortus, though, went against the customs of his species and kept quiet about that, because amongst his species, that was considered to be a high crime. Which would be kind of like if you were to take homophobia to the level it might have been considered, a century ago, where somebody could go to jail for sodomy. There was actually a time in human history where, wasn't it Oscar Wilde? I forget the exact details on that, but anyway, Oscar Wilde ended up in jail for it. I'm trying to think of exactly. There was like a quote, but I forget what it was. But I forget what I was actually going to reference there. But no, in human history, there was some pretty damn despicable things that were done for people just for having a preference that wasn't the 80 to 90% normal. And it's like, that was bad. And the Mocklins, that's in their society. But as a kind of a parody for it, for the Mocklins, it's not a homophobia. They decided to take it from another angle, and it's the same issue, only it's more of a heterophobia. And it was established that Bortus had kept quiet about this because, he's a reasonable being that didn't want to ruin this person's life because of their preference that doesn't hurt anybody at all. But needless to say, it's not going to make for a good relationship with him, so, they broke up. And then this character discreetly approaches the new Selayan character. One of the cats. Well, the cats made noise and that. Oh, now the cat is playing with something. Anyway, noises in the house aside. And you actually see the characters interacting in a way where you can see them becoming endearing to each other when this character becomes interested in a Selayan female, the Mocklin character, the guest character for the episode. And they actually kind of had some chemistry together. And then when you discover Bortus's husband, Clyden, discovers that this guy's heterosexual, confronts him and is going to rat him out. And then you get the murder plot where it's believed that this guy has been murdered by Clyden, and they discover that Clyden had murdered him, or they think he did, but the evidence was easily discovered when they go messing around in the environmental simulator, and you discover that this guy was going to go into hiding and falsified the idea that Clyden had murdered him. Now, Clyden said he was innocent, and they found him innocent, and in fact, the very same person who was becoming emotionally attached to him was the one who had to was responsible for, and was the one that discovered what happened, and sort of brought him to justice, but was more like the injustice. Now, here's the thing is, on the sake of honesty and just plain following the rules and kind of doing something that's kind of right, you couldn't let Clyden go to jail for a crime he didn't commit. At the same time, the guy who framed Clyden was actually completely justified in the circumstance. He framed somebody who was going to get him imprisoned for life just for being who he is. The person he framed was somebody who was going to do something abhorrent to him that he was going to have no defense against. So, of course, if you had to frame somebody, that was going to be the person. It's hard not to understand why he picked framing Clyden. I think I'm pronouncing the character's name correctly. That would be logical, and as a desperate maneuver, you kind of come away with understanding it. And that just kind of adds all the more to the tragedy of it. And it's in the end, he decides not to seek asylum, but he's going to go back to his homeworld for punishment, which, I don't know. I kind of felt that was just a little plot device because, well, he's a new character, but we don't want to change up the status quo enough to maybe keep him on the ship. Although, if he had taken asylum, he could have went to Earth. I personally wasn't a big fan of his decision to go back to his homeworld, not unless somehow he could do something to help others like himself. Like it just seemed like a cop-out at the end. But when they captured him, he was given the option to take asylum, and he decided to go back. I suppose maybe this would mitigate any of the shame it would bring to his family, because it was established that things like this would not only bring shame to himself, but to his entire family. So maybe by going to jail, he would mitigate that somehow. I'm not sure. But it had a tragic ending. And it ended with... it ended with them pondering, how can the other species of the Alliance, how long could they maintain an alliance with a culture that is basically like the Mocklins are? And in the Mocklins' defense, it's almost like they never had the time to think about how horrible they were. They evolved in a world that was extremely harsh, and their harsh and horrible traditions somehow helped them survive. And there is they live in a planet with very little water. They urinate once a year, and They probably were at war with each other quite a lot. Um, you know, they're often written as complex and interesting characters, but their culture is horrible, you know? Uh, and they don't have a lot of insight as to the goings on, a more brighter spectrum of how people can just live their life. They're like, you know, the stereotypical perfect example of either an extreme alt-right stereotype or the social justice warrior stereotypes, where they have an opinion of how people exist that is pretty much contradicting reality itself, and harsh and very much against the way a lot of people just live their lives or just existing. In the case of the social justice warriors, under the illusion of them helping people who are generally mistreated by society, they misrepresent society quite a bit, and are generally harsh on people who they believe or claim, because very often I don't even see how they can believe their own claims. Basically, they make enemies that they never should have needed to make enemies of on behalf of what they believe is protecting people who are being mistreated by society. Very often are people who have been extremely and are being extremely mistreated by society, but they don't have like a realistic approach to it. And at the same time, then you have the alt-right, which believes their way is the right, and they will criticize and attack anybody who doesn't really function within their culture, and, you know, let them fight. What do I care? Humans are fucked up. And the Mocklins are the perfect example of that, except they're kind of like a unified species with one fucked up view. And you can see in this, Bortus didn't really like the accusations against this person who was his ex, because he felt uncomfortable, you know, with people saying these things about him, because to the Mocklins, these things, even if true, would have been viewed as an insult and potentially very harmful to the individual. And at the end, you see Bortus looking off into space, sad. He has like this look. You can realize that Bortus knows something horrible happened to somebody that technically was innocent. Somebody who was in a bad situation through no fault of their own. And then you have, I want to call her Alora. I can't remember the name of the new character, but I gotta say, they're doing a good job of making the character likable. And at first I didn't think they would. All the bumps and noise. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, they're making the character very likable fast. I mean, when they introduced her as the character that punched her previous captain in the nose, and she said it had to be done, it's like, but she did it so hard she broke his nose. I think that would be an accidental loss of control, you know. Anyway, when they introduced her, I think like the character Ed was like questioning, you know, if they were getting themselves into something good with this person, you know, and yeah, you had good reason to question this character that was being introduced, but no, this character's turning out to be a good character, I guess. You know, not sure how to describe it, but yeah, this is turning out to be a great character. You can see her looking off sad into space, and it's kind of like Clyden comes to her and thanks her for finding out that he was innocent. And, you know, said that how Bortus said to trust her. And she's like, well, if you want to thank me, if you see me, walk the other way. Basically saying she wants nothing to do with him because of how his bigotry got somebody sent to jail. And he walks away kind of annoyed and insulted. And when he goes home to where Bortus is looking off into space, you know, he's insulted. Of course, he kind of deserves it. Or more precisely, the culture that he's not enlightened enough to turn away from deserves it. Unfortunately, in a way, he deserves it too, but part of it is his lack of enlightenment. And Bortus is there looking off sad into space, and you can see, like, this is not a happy ending. It ends with at least 3 characters seriously hurt by the incidents that happened. One of them off to be imprisoned for the rest of their lives. And it was very thoughtful. It was very strong. It was literally, this was everything the episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, which, if I remember correctly, I think was titled The Outcast, but I might be mixing it up with another. But everything of that episode that dealt with the androgynous species, that Riker, got attached to one of them, other than establishing that Riker could get romantically entangled with an androgynous life form, and it's no big deal to people of that century. Other than doing that, that was about the only good thing about that episode was, it's like Riker is enlightened enough that he's not going to get freaked out if the species or the individual he's attracted to has an innie or an outie for their genitals. That was kind of something for its time, but not really that much. And most of the scenes between them didn't work out that well. But they actually, this Mocklin character, and I can't remember his name, and the new Selayan character, I can't remember her name. I'm horrible with names in real life, and I'm horrible with names of fictional characters until I see them enough times over and over again that it just gets burnt in my memory. But, names. They had scenes between them that were legitimately almost touching. They actually had moments between them where you could actually see, like, a growing attachment between them as they interacted. You could kind of see how the Selayan character found him endearing. And when you realized he was attracted to her, you could kind of see what he saw in her. And even if it was such a short story, that you only had an hour to experience all the details that were being presented to you, and that's less than an hour after commercials are chopped out of the time period. You have a very well-written story. It was everything that episode of The Next Generation should have been, but wasn't. And the Orville didn't just do it right. To use a sports ball metaphor, they hit the fucker right out of the park. Didn't they? They did that episode real good. They blew that fucking episode right out of the fucking park, to use a sports ball metaphor. Didn't they, Tucker? Charles Tucker Cat. Hey, Tucker. Tucker Cat. Yeah. That was an outright fucking awesome episode. Oh, I can feel your claws on my hand. That means you're liking being held. How long until you get restless and you want me to put you down? Aw. Actually, there you go. There you go. All right, there you go. And I felt a little static electricity. I'm not sure. Was your fur picking up the electrons and taking them, or was my skin picking up the electrons and taking them? I don't know. I could just feel a minor plasma discharge between ions. Felt a little static electric shock. A lot of cat fur. I think it's the cat fur that picks up the excess electrons. Or is it? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Gotta put some more energy drink into my system, and it'll work its way right to my bladder. And I gotta hope that along the way, a little bit of the caffeine bleeds out into my system, so it can go into my mitochondria and help them produce ATP. Oh, that episode of the Orville. This season, last season was good. And I think the Orville realized that they were better off focusing more on the drama. In fact, of this season, And in fact, I made a reference to this before. I don't know if I actually uploaded that video or not yet. But I've referenced before that of the most recent, my evenings of watching both Star Trek Discovery and the Orville, the one thing that stood out to me the most, that haunted me as a little error or a little bad decision in creativity, was one little moment in the Orville. And I know what you're thinking, and I've said this before, I'll say this again. When I say something like that, you're like, the proper response is, Star Trek Discovery and the Orville? There's just one thing that stood out to you as being off, and it was from the Orville? Yes, of course. Star Trek Discovery, after that first season, it doesn't matter what Star Trek Discovery does at this point. They could establish the warp drive is powered by candy corn. And doesn't matter. Star Trek Discovery has already blown any standards of functioning within reason. It just has. It's just out there. The stupider Star Trek Discovery gets, it's like it's already broken the threshold where there's no standards. But of the Orville, there was one moment where the character John Lamar, I think I got his name correctly, the guy that used to pilot the ship, or well, he was actually the other guy was piloting the ship. The guy that used to sit next to the guy that was piloting the ship, doing all the other, all the other related things to piloting the ship, other than actually piloting the ship. The guy that was doing that eventually became the engineer. Basically, the guy that sat up front on the bridge and then went to the engineering section in the next season. Which means that show's version of Geordie LaForge, because of the first season of The Next Generation. There he was up front, sitting in the, sitting right there in front of Jean-Luc Picard's big screen TV. Then in the next season, he was down in engineering. Yeah. Anyway, that character made a comment about dating a two-headed alien and one head not knowing about the other. And I thought, that's awkward and it's silly, and it felt like a failed Futurama joke. Because Futurama jokes, they could be silly and harmful to the world building, and they could still get away with it if it was funny enough. And then Futurama got weaker. After the made-for-DVD movies were awesome, but after that, their later seasons, when they came back from cancellation, were fairly weak. And when he made that line, it wasn't that big of a deal. It wasn't that funny of a joke. But you're kind of left with, was he just bullshitting to his friend? Which kind of undermines the moment, I thought. And if he wasn't, I mean, that's some really weird world building, But for the most part, this season, and the Orville in general, is best when it doesn't focus on jokes. And this season has had a great sense of humor, but hasn't really focused on jokes. But the humor in the Orville is done best when they do it like in Ghostbusters. Some people think of the Ghostbusters movies, especially the first two, as being comedies. The 2016 movie, I think they tried to make it a comedy, but they forgot to make it funny. Just made it painful. But the first Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2, the humor comes from the characters and the character interactions and dealing with the absurd. In fact, there was an awesome, almost perfect moment in this episode of the Orville where the new character, the Selayan character, I want to say Zelayan because I see it spelled with an X, but it's Selayan. They're named after Mount Seleia on Vulcan, because their planet Seleia seems to be named after Mount Seleia, a mountain in Vulcan, which just tells me this is an alternate universe version of the Vulcans. Yeah, they evolved a bit different over the last, I guess, season and a half, and it's just a perfectly hilarious moment. And I gotta say that the fact that I had a bunch of carbonated beverages earlier, and then just put an energy drink on top of it, means I gotta go to the bathroom again. Alright. Oh my. Yeah, I should have had dry food today, but nope, I'm living on beverages. Living on beverages! Alright, so I'm back. And this thing didn't stop recording. And I'll soon probably go and watch some Star Trek The Next Generation, because this is the day that Star Trek The Next Generation's on television. A lot of the times when I do live streams, it's a day that Star Trek Enterprise is on television. So, this time it's not a day of the phase pistol. Today it's the day of the phaser. Yeah, well, whatever. Whatever. I don't know. If I can think of any final thoughts to end this video with, I don't know. I don't fucking know. I don't know a damn fucking thing about what I should be ending this video with. Can't think of anything. Damn it all. I rambled on about all kinds of stuff, and mostly just rambled. Non-productively rambled. Non-productively rambled. Oh wait, is there any of this left? Nope. Nah, I'm not gonna throw this one. Screw it. There we go. Alright, so anyway, I rambled on about... Yeah, I really want to check out the series, the movie series. Actually, I want to go look at the view once again. A long time since I saw it. I do want to check out Battle Angel again sometime. And the movie, when I saw ads for the movie, they had like the main character from it doing something, and I remember thinking, something about this makes me think of Battle Angel. And I mean, it was decades since I watched it. Other than a friend of mine had a book of the manga, and I might have flipped through it. It's been a long time since I saw it. Every now and then when I think of really awesome stuff I saw a long time ago, that pops into my mind, and then it's like, something just made me think, make me think of Battle Angel. And then I discovered Attila, Battle Angel. No, Atla? I don't even know how to pronounce her name now. But it's like, fuck yeah! It's like, once I saw that, it's like, wow, I heard that the James Cameron was thinking about doing this but then he got distracted doing Avatar-related stuff. And I remember thinking, this would be pretty cool to see a movie based on that. Now, normally, I think when you have a movie based on a series of books, be it based on a cartoon show or a comic book series, usually the movie's not as good. Movies are generally made to be mass-produced, minutia that will be more acceptable to a wide audience. on one hand, there's less censorship than with television generally, but excuse me, excuse me again. But with television, you have more time, you have more individual stories, you can have little things happen in the background over a period with more individual small stories. I consider television as well as comic books, a series of novels, all of it to be generally a better storytelling device media, better storytelling vehicle than movies, theatrical motion pictures to be the inferior way to tell stories. Although, thanks to marketing and how Hollywood is a big industry, a bigger deal is generally made out of movies than just about anything. I mean, I think a video game is a far better way to tell a story than a theatrical movie. But, I don't know. Hollywood is pretty full of itself, and they generally get a free pass on that one. People still make big deals out of movies. Now my sinuses are getting constricting. So I'm going to see if I can... need to get a new bottle of nasal spray. Hopefully enough nasal spray got in there. Yeah. But anyway... what's this thing say? Yeah, I've been rambling on long enough. I'm trying to think of final thoughts. I talked about some random Star Trek stuff. Talked about Star Trek Discovery. That's draining. Good thing I'm full of caffeine. Because no, seriously, as I think about Star Trek Discovery, it actually is kind of draining. I mean, when I watched season 1... I disagreed with a whole bunch of creative decisions the show has made. But I did manage to find some enjoyment in it. But the only way you can find, to me, the only way I can find enjoyment in Star Trek Discovery is to just kind of sit back, don't expect a good story, don't expect a cohesive story, just sit back and try to listen to references to shields and phasers and just think, oh yeah, the reference to the Star Trek thing. It's kind of like watching an episode of The Big Bang Theory. Yeah, they had a couple good episodes, and then they had a lot of episodes that are just, yeah, it's just another episode of The Big Bang Theory. But supposed to be really popular amongst geek culture because, oh, well, I might get a Star Trek reference. You might get a DC Comics reference. You might get a Marvel Comics reference. You get some references like that. But that alone does not make a show great, It just means there's something in there to get your attention and amuse you a little bit for a moment. And to be honest, The Big Bang Theory, to me, at its best, was legitimately amusing at times. And when it's not, it's just boring. I mean, it had some great episodes, but the one where they were doing kind of like a treasure hunt thing, kind of like they were following clues and puzzles to find the next thing. And meanwhile, Wolowitz and Amy end up going on their own adventure, just having fun together while everybody else is fighting over this thing. And that one actually I thought was legitimately funny. The one where they all go to like some sort of symposia, or they're having a symposium for whatever it was they were supposed to talk about. And they were all staying in the same hotel room, and at the end of it, everybody's arguing in public, and the only one that's actually acting halfway normal in that one is Sheldon. That one came off as kind of funny when I think of episodes that were pretty good. But for the most part, it's just like, it's another sitcom. And it kind of represents geek culture with stereotypes that were like, when the episodes were new, it was like they were kind of like at least 10 years, sometimes 20 years out of date. So, it's whatever. It's whatever. The show is whatever. Yeah, I'm trying to think of if there was anything I didn't mention. Well, I'm gonna look at this for 1 second. Brazzers is broadcasting live. Okay, they're the ones that produce porn. All right. No, somebody I don't know sent me a friend request, so yeah, I'm gonna approve them, but I'll do that later. Video about the Commodore 64 version of Rambo First Blood Part 2. Notoriously hard. Anyway, alright, what was I gonna... Yeah, I'm trying to think if there was... Anyway, I will... see. I mentioned the Battle Angel movie. A lot of stuff was coming up over shitty things gone with the Captain Marvel movie. Let's see. Just as I came online, there was news that Bernie Sanders is gonna start his. Oh wait, I went to go into something on Twitter, and then I accidentally retweeted it. Like, fuck off! Let me see. Tweet is not available. Fucks. Wait a sec. This tweet is not available because it includes potentially sensitive content. You gotta be fucking kidding me. That's a YouTube video though. Okay. One of the YouTube videos that I shared to Twitter I couldn't view it on Twitter because it contained sensitive content. Oh, son of a bitch! It was. It's a Kyle Kalinske video about oh, son of a bitch. So I mean, I got it to come up, but it's anti-war journalist censored by Facebook for BS reason. A video on Secular Talk. And, let's see. Why is the volume not working on this? Anyway, oh, there.
Something that's actually a very pervasive narrative online. But it's not true. You're going to see a great example, a great counterexample to that. The real breakdown isn't right versus left. The real breakdown is establishment versus anti-establishment. Let me give you the specifics of this. So this is...
Anyway, I'm going to exit out of that. I already watched that. But son of a whore, that fucking thing, I mean, talk about censorship. I clicked on it, and I was like, why won't that? Why did it tell me that? Why? And what it was is I accidentally retweeted it after I'd already posted it. I think that was the one, or maybe I clicked on this one by accident. What one's this one? Or is that the same one I just checked? This one is Battle Angel, Rotten Tomatoes versus Critics versus Audiences. Yeah, that one was Attila, Battle Angel, Rotten Critics. So this one is talking about the Battle Angel movie. Maybe that... But I'm pretty sure I clicked on the one above it, which was a Secular Talk video. All right, I'm just going to click on this one, because there's another one that I don't want to retweet it. I want to open it. All right, what was the other one? Oh, this was kind of interesting, but it's a little bit off topic for this. Cop arrests 11-year-old over Pledge of Allegiance. Yeah, I mean...
For not standing up.
Yeah.
Pledge of Allegiance. I wish I was kidding.
Yeah, Jimmy Dore does... On political and social issues, I strongly recommend Kyle Kalinske as Secular Talk and Jimmy Dore. I got watching Jimmy Dore. I wasn't expecting to like Jimmy Dore, but I watched political porno. Somebody who goes by Pepper. I believe it's Pepper O. Well, I think it's a zero, then it's a zero, then a letter O, then Pepper, then a zero, then a letter O, or did I get the letter O and the zeros reversed? But she basically has O's at the end of Pepper. She goes by Pepper. Don't know what her real name is. Doesn't matter. That's her online name. And she used to post videos to DLive and DTube, and she would do political porno, and those were great. Those were great watching her commentate on politics and obviously doing pornographic things at the same time. Sometimes if she wasn't up for doing pornographic things in front of the camera, she would do Pepper Reacts. But and she talked about Jimmy Dore a lot. And then I got watching Jimmy Dore, and Jimmy Dore came to DTube at the time. For a while he was putting videos on DTube. And yeah, I got following Jimmy Dore because yeah, Jimmy Dore's good. Jimmy Dore knows what he's talking about. He tends to look at things from a perspective of multiple human beings. He admits that in the past he was a little less open-minded, but he just generally does good stuff. And yeah, and he's like Kyle Klinsky. He's anti-censorship, which is good. And yeah, basically some kid, and had the legal right to not stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and he usually didn't. But of course, the jingoistic, patriotic, and I view patriotism as pretty much evil. I mean, I know it's not that bad. I use stand for the national theme song just out of simple. I don't want to get in an argument with these assholes, but the simple fact is, it's obnoxious. And it's not like I can't do it. But the thing is, the fact that they want you to do it is almost obnoxious. And it's kind of like when people say things like, I think taxes are stealing. I would agree with that under certain circumstances, but for the most part, no. Pay your dues. You're part of society. You're using money that's printed by us as an organization, I think it's really stupid when people, act like you need to be free and taxes are theft, shit like that I find stupid. But I also find it stupid, on the other end of things where it's like some people, and the thing is, it's almost sometimes it's the same people that would act like taxes are stealing, but you gotta salute your flag, worship your government. But when they take me, they're stealing from you, even though they printed it themselves, and it's a collective value. That's like, look, fucker. It's like, this is basically a prayer to the nation. It's one thing to coexist and be a part of a system, but when they're telling you to stand at attention for a fucking theme song, often for most nations, there's even a little hint of jingoism in it, a little jingoistic, we stand on guard for thee, or the bombs in the air, it's like bullshit, brainwashing bullshit to make you feel that you're part of something that makes you better than people that are in another place, and we're all working together, and it's okay when our businessmen pay off our politicians in ways that allow both to make war off of murdering massive numbers of foreigners. And it's like, even if you weren't, it's like, okay, yeah, okay, there's a anthem for our nation. The nation has a theme song. But as far as I'm concerned, the theme song to Chrono Trigger deserves a salute for being a fucking awesome game, but I'm not gonna make you stand for it, And as far as I'm concerned, it's more inspiring than, some fucking song that's basically a prayer for your nation, So, this wasn't actually the national anthem. This was the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag, So obviously this was, within the United States. And it's like, God fucking damn. It was like, of all the obnoxious bullshit. And it's like, you know what? It's a similar attitude. It's like this authoritarian attitude, It's like, you gotta show your proper respect. Like, oh, fuck off. It reminds me, there was one time I was playing video games with a cousin of mine and a relative, and I didn't say anything, but I was tempted to say something. I was playing video games with a cousin of mine, and an uncle of mine said something to him, and he responded politely. He was playing the game, continued to play the game, and responded politely and accurately. But he didn't hit the pause button, stop, look away, look him in the eyes, you know. And, you know, he responded completely, attentively, like he was listening, but he continued to watch what he was doing on the screen. And you know what the old fucker did? The uncle of mine that I'm referencing here? He goes, hey, you look at me when I'm talking to you. And I was like, the obnoxious arrogance of that. Somebody's doing something, they're responding to you politely, and you're like, look at me when you talk to me, you know. And he wasn't that deep voice, but it was with that same authority. I almost got up and told him to go fuck himself and called him an arrogant cocksucker or something, because that's just bullshit. But hey, you know. But yeah, anyway, yeah, that's, I mean, that has nothing to do with media and pulp culture. The whole reason why I'm calling this a live video log, Unimultiverse, rather than Joey Live or something like that, or the No Fucks Given live show or something like that, is because I was going to focus on talking about media. But yeah, that got my attention, you know, a kid arrested, an 11-year-old, a 6th grader, arrested for not standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, which he was allowed to do. Most days he didn't do that. He went to school, did the usual thing, got a substitute teacher. The substitute teacher decided to freak out. How dare you not worship this little prayer to our nation? You know, that sort of thing. You know, and basically she wanted to kick him out, but he was where he had the right to be, doing what he does every day. And apparently he disagreed with being kicked out of there. I'm not sure the details on it. And so they brought in a police officer who viewed the kid as threatening and arrested him. You fucking kidding me. You fucking kidding me. You fucking kidding me. Of all the arrogant, obnoxious things, you know, to arrest an 11-year-old for that. And every now and then you hear like the older generation saying, kids today, they need to get smacked around to show some respect. It's like, what Mike makes right is not proper respect. And 2, the actual obnoxious asshole is the person that's using threats and violence and intimidation to... This guy, the kid himself, actually, he probably takes some heat from assholes for standing up on a principle. And yeah, it probably would be easier for him to just stand up. Me, when I hear the national theme song and they want people to stand up, I stand up. I don't sing along, but I stand up. It's not because the song deserves respect. It's just a fucking song. Look, Land of Confusion by Genesis, an actual protest song. That might... I'm not going to stand up for it. You know, I'm not just going to get up and say, hey, Land of Confusion, you know. A song protesting the Cold War, you know. Fucking awesome song. That deserves 1,000 times more respect than any fucking national anthem. You know, don't stand up for it. The theme to Phantasy Star 4. Beautiful work of art. Awesome song. Just fucking sounds just a fucking great, you know. Not going to tell you to stand up for it. I might, because fuck yeah, I want to salute Phantasy Star 4. Fucking awesome theme it has, too. Goddamn awesome. But you know what? Arrest somebody for not standing up for it? Fuck off, you know. As far as I'm concerned, that deserves more respect than any national anthem. The opening to Star Trek Enterprise, especially in the first 2 scenes when it had better musical instruments playing it. I mean, the best theme music for Enterprise is probably the ending credits music. But that opening song, you know, about Faith of the Heart, you know, you can picture humanity doing better, becoming better. It's actually kind of a beautiful song with beautiful visual imagery that matches up with it. You know, the lyrics, you know, is very, very much the spirit of Star Trek. A secular type of faith that, you know, you can do better, that you can reach any star. That deserves standing up and attention for far more than any fucking national pledge of allegiance. Wouldn't recommend somebody, you know, be arrested for not standing up, you know, for either one, but You know, yeah, that was kind of interesting news that popped up today. I watched that video earlier. Yeah, great one done by the Jimmy Dore store. Yeah, I almost said the Jimmy Dore store. Jimmy Dore show. Yeah, recommend that strongly. Yeah, strongly recommend that one, that video. The Kyle Kalinske video where, what was he talking about? Oh yeah, about yeah, censorship. Somebody on the left got censored, and he started off commenting, "I'm so sick of hearing people on the right saying that they're always the ones being censored." You know, Kyle Kalinski's great. As is Jimmy Dore. So I strongly recommend their stuff. And if you can get, I find if somebody recently posts to DTube, I find their videos show up, and then their older stuff. Usually, if you scroll down, you can get their older stuff to load. But if nothing loads on the screen, then you can't scroll down, and sometimes old stuff just won't load as a little glitch on DTube. But I know that Pepper stuff isn't playing on D Live anymore because I went back and checked it, because that's one of the content creators I really like going back to and watching again was the stuff done by Pepper. And I especially like, watching people on D. Oh, I probably should. I'm streaming this to YouTube, but if I can find good content on DTube, I love DTube. And BitChute, there's a lot of bad content on BitChute. Oh man, I'm actually an active supporter of BitChute because I want the platform to thrive, as well as Subscribestar. But goddamn, BitChute, is anti-censorship, which I appreciate. But they retweeted some videos done by their own content creators, and some of them were good. But there was a feminist who was a trans exclusionary feminist. Basically, she's a feminist fighting for her own perspective on, but what she thinks will further her agenda, basically. Now, I'm going to say this. I don't say this of all feminists, but I would say in her case, she seems to be one of the people who, when you were a kid, they grouped up the boys and the girls, and every now and then you had this argument about boys versus girls. Well, she's an adult, and she's still doing it. I get the impression that that's her. I don't know that much about her, didn't follow her, but she's trans exclusionary, so I get the impression she's one of the fuckers that grew up, boys versus girls, and took it to a new level, but she's not going to let anybody join her team if they were born with a penis. So, basically she's said some shit that was anti-transgender. So, basically she's an asshole and a hypocrite. So, first off, as far as I can tell, right off the bat, I probably despise her, because some feminists will tell you, it's all the same thing. We're all exclusionary and all this stuff. We're all for treating people better and stuff like that. It's like, no, not everybody. All groups have people who are not all the same. And this person, using the feminism name, is probably one of the worst examples of feminism. That said, I don't know that much about her, but she said some shit about trans people. She got kicked off Twitter. On one hand, I think she's an asshole for what she said. On the other hand, I wouldn't kick her off of a platform. If what she said was so bad, then maybe they should censor only what she said, but kicking her off the platform I think is too much for anybody. I just don't approve of that. If it's comments on a video, I know why people turn off comments on the video. I mean, who really wants to deal with that a lot of the times? When I post videos, I think, well, I'll leave the comments on some versions of the video, but if I post it somewhere else, I might as well turn the comments off. They have links to places where they can talk to me or whatever. It's like, I can understand not want to bother with communicating with people, fucking humans. They're fucking annoying, okay? But, but even, I don't approve of this censorship bullshit. And even if I think she's a jackass, I just wouldn't kick her off the platform. Now, that said, one of the first videos I saw that was retweeted by BitChute herself, because they tweeted some of the stuff, was somebody talking out about this. And the only good thing I could think about it is they had an anti-censorship perspective. But they retweeted a bunch of videos talking about the subject. But the fact that that was one of them just made me cringe. It didn't stop me supporting BitChute. But I wouldn't support that individual video. But some of the other videos on the subject that they retweeted, I watched another one, and the other one wasn't bad like that. But the first one I saw was like, oh, god damn, that's some shitty attitude from an uptight fucker, you know. But yeah, but for the most part, I actually like the platform of BitChute, and I'm not sure how I got to talking about that, other than I got talking about stuff on Twitter. Yeah. That was something though. When I clicked on one of those videos, and I think it was the top one, the one about, excuse me. Let's see if that comes up again. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was this one here that I accidentally retweeted. I meant to click to open it. You know what? I probably shouldn't be loading that stuff because it's information going back and forth on this device between me and the internet, and my internet connection is sucky enough that I probably did the resolution of this video no favors. Hell, I'd probably skipped some words and all kinds of stuff the way this will manifest itself online. I don't know. But I probably should end this. Basically, there's horrible shit going on in the world. The human species is fucking nuts. A couple decades ago, the species is fucking nuts. A couple decades ago, you could kind of see how there was at least some slow progress. Even if, like fucking idiots, humanity was resisting progress, kind of had to do it because fucking common sense, Then out of nowhere, you had the George W. Bush years, which there was thankfully a bit of a resistance to, and, culture, kind of helped culture move on a little bit, because for all the shitty stuff a very famous, well-known government in the States was doing, worldwide, people were like, this sort of right-wing bullshit's a load of crap. Then in later years, you discover sort of like an insane version that's the regressive left, which probably evolved out of an overblown, exaggerated response to previous right-wing shit that was basically generally considered outdated anyway. And they managed to make themselves seem important. They got themselves into the mainstream just enough that, in turn, you see, like, one of the first times I saw this was a video by Computing Forever. And I didn't follow his stuff, but it came up. And a lot of people, I think, became really famous because Anita Sarkeesian was saying stupid shit about video games, misrepresenting video game players, video games herself, and video game culture. And reasonably, there was a lot of criticism of her. But a lot of people who had an agenda on the right-wing side of things started to label that as the progressive agenda. Meanwhile, people on the left were referring to what she was doing as regressive. But enough people on the right kept referring to that as progressive, so that get kind of like, well, the progressives think this. And that became like common thought. And as such, if you picked sides, and a lot of people on either side just went fucking nuts. They went way too far. And you could actually see, of all things, like this right-wing reaction to it like the alt-right culture, all that, like shitty people just becoming shittier because they had the social justice warriors to use as a bad example of what they thought was the left. And to their credit, as fucked up as they are on the far right, I gotta say, the left and I don't mean the real left, I mean the regressive left, did manage to influence culture. Sometimes for the better. I mean, the Me Too movement was kind of a good thing. I'm sure they would like to take credit for taking down Bill Cosby, but I'd say that motherfucker was coming down anyway. It was just that was happening anyway. But Harvey Weinstein and some of that shit, it's like, yeah, okay, that's good. But in turn, you have like, for all the absurd stuff, like the culture wars, like there's a crazy culture war. Now and the thing is, there's like I gotta give the right credit for one thing, and that's the left has managed to misrepresent the world around them to a level of extreme that I thought only the right could do. And, and the right, there's enough diversity on the right. It's kind of like a lot of people on the left are treating the MAGA hat, the Make America Great Again hat, to being the equivalents of I recently heard the Ku Klux Klan hood, or another one I've been hearing is wearing the swastika on a Nazi uniform. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. On one hand, there's a lot of xenophobic policies involved with Trump, who brought about that hat, that quote, but largely it was a lot of things relating to bad trade deals and a lot of shit like that. And Trump's own philosophy is basically a buffoon. I mean, it's been stated that he would have considered single payer health care, but he sided with the Republicans and he went along with the Republican lines on that. He came off as far less homophobic and transphobic than Hillary Clinton, but as a Republican, he knew a lot of his voting base was the Christian right, so he went along with their shit on bathrooms. When they're afraid of the wrong person going in with the wrong bathroom. That nasty bullshit. Trump in and of himself is like a non-existent ideology who was capable of saying a few reasonable things like NAFTA bad, Trans-Pacific Partnership bad, and what he had to say on war was probably about 60% bad. Of course, they did prop him up against somebody who was 99% bad and was saber-rattling against Russia and was proud of every war they ever got involved with that she made money off of. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's like, to say that the MAGA hat, MAGA, however you're supposed to pronounce it, MAGA, MAGA, those fucking red hats, to say that's the same thing as the Klan's hood is like totally fucking out of touch. Now, I remember hearing a pretty decent metaphor where somebody referred to animal rights, and they compared chickens being stuck in horrible coops, being tortured and stressed out all day, doing horrible things, being uncomfortable. I remember once hearing somebody comparing it to humans in a concentration camp. And they're like, what? You can't say that. That's anti-Semitic. How dare you belittle, the human suffering? It's like, well, you're talking about a living being whose life is endangered in a condition where they're suffering and being treated horribly. I don't know. I can see the similarities. I mean, in one example was humans, yeah, who were treated horribly, and on the other hand, it's something that's not human, but has the ability to remember, experience, feel. When it dies, it 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 comes to an end. It is like a human being, fragile, a functioning, processing life form with experience and the desire to continue experiencing and the desire for comfort. I think one of the cats might be getting sick. No, you're not? You're okay? Okay. You're not overeating, are you? No. Another cat, just doing cat stuff. But anyway, I'm going to bring this to an end. But basically, if you were to use a human tragedy as a metaphor for animal suffering, you're liable to get horrible criticism for it. But nobody's getting called out for like comparing a MAGA hat to the Klan's hats or the swastika or whatever, which is, it's just like, it's nuts. But we're living in a world where people are going nuts. People overreacting to the wrong stuff and just going fucking nuts. And I'm going to end this because I've got an off topic. And I was going to talk about Star Trek and the Orville and stuff like that. And I've gone on long enough. So let's bring this to an end. No, end. Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Yes, I do. I am going to end this now.